With world-class expertise and local insight, Dexus creates value not just for today, but long into tomorrow.
From Barangaroo Studios, the AusBiz COB is the key stuff you need to know about the day in business and finance.
Just gone 4 p.m. here in Sydney. Welcome to the COB. I'm Juliette Sarli. Let's have a quick look at where the local market is tracking. Look, it was all looking so positive this morning. We had that very solid rally coming through from Wall Street after that 3-day weekend. Optimism over the delay in the EU tariffs from President Trump, and also an unexpected jump in US consumer confidence. Our market, though, started to peter away towards the end of the day's trade. Quite a bit of selling coming through in the banks today. No surprise when you've got the likes of CBA, of course, at those lofty levels. But let's get more broadly to the overall themes of the day, and certainly that afternoon slump has seen us close marginally lower on the CBO 200 and the ASX 200 as we enter match off, but a very big win for Woodside. So the federal government has given the go ahead for its Northwest Shelf plant to continue to be in operation until 2070. Remember, this was a 6-month review process, very much marred by some delays, a lot of opposition, particularly from the Greens, and also some costly delays there too. But the Albanese government now approving the Northwest Shelf extension, so ending almost 7 years of approvals. It was a 6-month review process, but 7 years of approvals, which really were, I guess, somewhat of a lightning rod for climate activism. And surprise rise, we did have a slight tick up coming through in the core CPI print for the month of April. When you look at the trimmed mean, rather, coming in at 2.8%, so at the higher end of that 2 to 3% band that the RBA is comfortable with. But most economists still saying that July will be a live meeting, 65% chance according to Money Markets that we will see a follow-up rate cut in July. Worth noting both TD Securities' Prashant Unahu, who I spoke to today, and also HSBC Paul Bloxham, who I spoke to yesterday. They don't think there'll be a rate cut in July. They think that August will be the next move. All right, let's have a look at some of the sectoral moves, particularly in iron ore, as we saw weakness coming through in the commodity, and MinRes, of course, also once again cutting its output by around 10%, sending shares down by 6%. Quick look as well at the energy sector, particularly Woodside. That move there, closing higher by almost 4%. You did have some moves coming through in oil prices as well in the Asian session, which lifted that sector. Tech stocks looking very good today, led by Block, which is not on that screen. We'll get to that in a moment, but Tech One there up by about 3%. The Nasdaq was higher by 2.5% overnight. And CBA there coming off some record highs, and all the banks lower, as I mentioned, a bit of profit taking occurring. In terms of the corporate news, it is all about Woodside, the federal government approving its request to extend the life of its Northwest Shelf gas plant until 2070 following that 6-month review. Goodman Group also in focus today. Now, it's kept its full year earnings per share estimates at 9% growth, but it did cite economic and trade uncertainty, saying that means customers are becoming wary about securing industrial property. Block shares rose in New York trade. The CDIs here today up 5%. It is allowing Bitcoin payments through its Square business. And Web Travel also having an excellent day, up 11.5% as it targets record earnings in full year 26. Heading the other way, of course, we mentioned Min Resources, cutting its iron ore guidance by 10%. Let's get his take, and welcome to the COB, Jonathan Takadina from MPC Markets. And Jonathan, some breaking news in the energy space in the last hour or so surrounding Woodside.
Yeah, absolutely. So energy's been a beaten down sector, and it's been a tough trade of late. Obviously, we've seen crude oil drop well below 60, but it looks like it's bottoming out. And obviously, with looks like the tariff has been rolled back or somewhat. It seems that the markets aren't reacting as violently as it was previously to any news that Trump puts out. It seems that it's full steam ahead, and basically, energy does drive growth in the economy. So obviously now, that sector's in play.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Does anything else that was released today take your fancy? I mean, Goodman Group, of course, talking about the uncertainty out there, meaning that people aren't taking on big, I guess, deals in terms of property, but also some pretty positive news from web travel, given we've already heard these, sort of bad news updates coming through from a number of travel companies recently.
Yeah, it seems that, like, especially in the travel sector, a lot of the bad news has been priced in, and that it's actually bottoming out here. And that's why we've seen a bit of a jump in web travel. If you have a look at Qantas as well, that's back at near the highs as well. So obviously that sector was beaten down, but now that because we aren't seeing the markets react as violently to any sort of trade news, it seems that the market's back to sort of bullish mode, and that's why we see the XJO back above 8,400 now. Granted, the futures were a lot stronger overnight, and intraday we have seen some selling, but 8,400 is still a lofty level. Like, if you had asked me back at the start of April when the market was at its lows that we'd see 8,400 before the end of the year, I would have said no. But here we are, less than 2 months later. We're at the end of May now, and we're back near record highs on the XJO. So it's been a great rally, and the thing is, the breadth is what's driving it as well. So especially in the US, it's not just the tech names that are getting a bid here. Obviously, here in Australia, the banks have been leading this rally, but if I look down to 300, there's a lot of mid cap and a lot of sort of second tier companies that are still getting a bid, and the charts look great there.
Yeah, and I guess to that point of where we've come in the last couple of months, it's all been about Trump's backflips as well. And I know they're terming that coin now Taco Trump. Are we getting a little bit better at understanding how his mind works in this second presidency?
Well, if you go to the other deal, so what he does is kind of like a shock and awe reaction. And I think what stock markets tend to do is that if you come with the same sort of shock and awe strategy, it tends to it tends to be a lesser effect the more you try and do the same thing. So the markets are now basically any news, like, so the last piece of news was the 50% EU news, I think just before the markets closed on our Friday, and the market did react, but it wasn't as violent as the first reaction in April. So I think we'll see the same sort of reaction going forward. Any news where he tries to that shock and awe treatment, I think the markets will just take it in its stride and know that basically he's rolled back every single sort of high tariff at any country and hasn't been able to get anything through at this stage. And so the markets will just go, well, look, you can talk up big all you want, but it just seems that you can't get anything through on the other side. And so the markets are reacting, and you can just see it. Like, most of the markets around the world are back quite bullish and looking to head higher from here.
Yeah, interesting that it's starting to play through though as well. I noted that the Temu owner PDD tumbled as we're starting to see some of its sales hit. Speaking of big name stocks, Nvidia, Jonathan, tonight.
Well, it's already had a great bounce in anticipation of these results. What I think will happen is that I think it might head up to the top end of the range here around that 150. And, they do have a history of coming out with some really, really, sort of market beating news. But, I think a lot of the bad news was priced in, and it's rebounded quite well. So I think it's going to be a positive effect. Obviously, they've talked about chip sales in China and how they can sort of, work with China to help them with their sort of GPU needs. But obviously, Trump doesn't want that kind of help in that regard. So my call is that the news will be quite positive. I think the markets will react positively, but a lot of the bounce has already been priced in. So I think it might hit 150 tomorrow morning when it does get released. But I just think the markets in general want to head on higher. Any news that should be market moving seems to get bid up, and any selling just seems to get absorbed by the bidders. So just in general, it looks like the markets want to head on higher, and I'm a momentum guy, and I don't want to fight that.
Yeah, all right. What about the momentum we've been seeing in uranium stocks?
Yeah, that's been a great move. One thing I've noticed is that in America, a lot of the names have kind of just started to peter out, but the names here in Australia, especially Boss Energy and Deep Yellow, they're the two names that have caught a massive bid. It looks like the momentum's still in play there. And until we see some, as I said, some technical sort of lower lows, it looks like the momentum's heading higher. So I would stick with that trade at this stage, give it a little bit of room, but just understand that uranium has been a tough trade, and it is quite volatile. So if you are in it, just be ready to pull the pin if you're more of a shorter term trader, which I tend to be.
All right, and I can't let you go because you've got a lot of fans out there without mentioning something you're liking in the gold space at the moment.
Yeah, so Mika Metals is one that I put out in the newsletter yesterday. Still trading around that 14.5 cent, and the main reason I do like it is that it's going to go from explorer/developer towards a producer. They've got their sort of first pour coming in around 4 to 5 weeks, I believe. So once that sort of news hits the markets, then more sort of fund managers pop it up on their radar. So I do think that it's trading around the 370 mil market cap, and I think it heads much higher from here once it gets into production.
All right, Jonathan, always a pleasure. Have a great rest of your day. Jonathan Takadina there joining us from MPC Markets in Sydney. The stock of the day, Web Travel. We had Koshi here from our experts, Andrew Island from DP Wealth Advisory and Henry Jennings from Marcus Today.
I think this is a pretty good result. They did have lower EBITDA margins, but I think the market remains a little bit optimistic that will be sorted by the fact that TTV will be bigger and it will continue to grow into the second half. So I think the market was a little bit probably too bearish on Web Travel, and it has been reflected, I guess, in the share price today, and that has been a bit of a positive surprise.
The market was really expecting it to be a somewhat ordinary result, which is why it was under some pressure, and that short interest has been, or people selling it in anticipation of it being an ordinary result. But it's still looking fairly fully priced in a P of 20 times, but forecast earnings growth of only 17. Right. To Henry's point around the momentum, though, it takes 3 days for good or bad news to wash through a company. So given this sort of positive guidance, you might expect it to pop even a little bit more, albeit we've had a pretty good pop today. But I'm with Henry. I'd probably let it settle. It's a hold for the time being, but
All right, as we mentioned, we kind of petered out of that momentum on the market in the latter part of the day's trade. But here are some of the positive winners, including Web Travel that we just spoke about, up 11.5%. I mentioned Block also rising after it's now allowing Bitcoin as a payment on its Square platform. Temple and Webster, I just had a delivery from them. Am I responsible for that 4% gain? I don't think so. All right, let's have a look at the downside. ALS hit with a broker downgrade, down 8%. MinRes, of course, cutting its guidance. Liontown being dragged down there too. And Fisher and Pakel, now it came through with a 43% jump in full year NPAT, but the market obviously wanted more than that. Let's have a look at what the small end of town saw today, including some good gains coming through from Dateline Resources, up by 21%. To the downside though, Bougainville Copper. Now Credit Clear, we just had the CEO on, so an interesting interview there that Andrew did, and they are seeing a clear path there to their guidance, their full year guidance, but shares being hit by some 8% in today's trade. All right, tonight, of course, we're getting the Fed minutes, and also, as we mentioned, with Jonathan, NVIDIA in focus, along with Salesforce and HP. Let's have a listen to what Angelo Zeno from CFRA Research in New York said, giving us a preview of what we can expect from NVIDIA tonight.
We are seeing, clearly some deceleration on a sequential basis. The April quarter number would imply decelerating growth to about 10% on a sequential basis, and further deceleration to about 6% in the July quarter. Part of the reason for that clearly has to do with lost revenue in China. That's well known at this point in time, but we want to see greater clarity in terms of what the China market looks like for NVIDIA. But as when we kind of think about the expectations here, looking ahead, it's all going to be about the data center revenue. That's going to be driven by Blackwell, of course, and we do think that revenue looks good, especially in the U.S. with the hyperscalers, and that momentum should continue as we progress through the calendar year.
And of course, because we always deliver, we've also got Dan Ives joining us from Wedbush tomorrow after NVIDIA's results. So be sure to tune in. We'll be playing that interview in the 10 o'clock show, The Open. Looking ahead, of course, more closely to tomorrow, ANZ Business Confidence Survey being released. CapEx as well for the March quarter. Business investment tipped to lift by around 0.5%. And on the AGM front, we're going to hear from MA Financial. Let's give you a final check of where we've finished. Pretty flat there on the CBO 200. I mentioned the selling coming through in the banks really weighing on the overall market. So when you see CBA drop, you tend to see the market drop these days too. The ASX 200 down 10 points, 0.1%, 8396 is where we finish after earlier it hit a 3-month high. So the bottom performing stocks, we just saw the likes of ALS and Liontown, but really some very solid moves from the likes of Block, Web Travel, Temple and Webster and Woodside as the government gave the green light for the extension of its North West gas shelf project. Gosh, say that 4 times fast. All right, that does it for today. We will be back bright and early tomorrow, of course, and get you across those NVIDIA results. We'll see you then.